what we're going to do here is talk about three specific shapes. We've got the equilateral triangle, we've got the 60-degree diamond, and then we've got a hexagon. Now these three shapes work really well together. You can put them into larger patterns. They've all kind of got similar angles, and there's a similar process for cutting them. So we're going to do them all together. This is kind of a master demonstration, so that and tutorial, so that if you were able to do this tutorial and able to do it well, you can pretty much do anything with the Versaguide after that. So this would be a great thing to practice. And so how we're going to start this out is we're going to start out with a 12 by 12 square of glass, and we're going to score that at different increments and eventually break it into three pieces to use for three different processes here. So the first step is to set this all up at 2-inch increments. So as always, you've got the lock bar straight edge at 0, should always stay there. And then we've got each of these others set at 2 inches. And the more precise and dead on you set these, the more precise your cuts will be. So we've got that set up. So what I have here is a 12 by 24 sheet, and I just want to show that you don't need to pre-trim anything. If there was kind of a rough edge here, you could just start, and wherever you start here, that will be the left side of your eventual piece of glass. You don't even have to trim off the rough edges here if everything you're doing is cutting this way. So you'll kind of see what I'm talking about here in a second. So our first step here is we're going to line up the 0 mark with the bottom corner of this glass, because we don't need to trim anything away. If we were going to trim something away, we would probably line it up in about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. So another thing you want to do is make sure that this edge is square. Another way you can make sure is also you can trim it off if you want to. But for now, we've already got that squared, so we're just going to start there. And you don't honestly actually even need this 0 mark. This 0 mark is just showing you where your particular cutting head and cutting wheel will meet the edge of this aluminum here. So you can also line it up just by putting your tool here and matching that to the edge. You could do that on any of these straight edges, but it's a little bit easier and quicker if you have a mark there, especially if you're frequently using the same cutting head. You could also have marks at different angles. I've got an angle here that we're going to use later marked. You can also clean this bar off and make new marks if you want, or you could cover it with a piece of white tape or something. This bar here is made to get scratched up and used. It is just something that you bump your glass up against, and feel free to draw any kind of guides or anything on there that you want. Okay, so we're doing right now this first step here. We're going to score every 2 inches, and we're going to make 4 scores. You can see these blue lines here. Okay. And you can score towards yourself, away from yourself. You just want to make sure that your tool is always straight up and down and not tilting to one side or the other. Because of the distance from the glass, if you tilt, you're going to have quite a bit of error and imprecision in your scores. So the best way to do that is to make sure it's all lined up straight, vertically away from you, and then just running the whole thing, moving your whole arm towards and away from yourself. Okay, so we've got those 4 scores. Our second step is we want to have this first section here be every inch. So what we're going to do, we're going to mark a 1-inch spot here on the glass. And then we're going to move the 0 mark, match it up there. And then go ahead and make these two blue scores here. Okay. Because we're starting with a larger piece, so we need to make this score here to cut the whole thing out. And go ahead and score that. Okay. So we'll put this aside. And then, as shown in this tutorial, we're going to break this into 3 pieces, okay? One of them is divided every inch, another is scored every 2 inches, and the last one is just a 4-inch strip. So first we're going to start with our 1-inch increments, and we're going to turn this horizontally. And move on to the next step. So this first piece we're going to cut into equilateral triangles. Okay? And the first step is that in order to get equilateral triangles, your height is going to be your distance between each of these scores is going to be 1.55 times the height of the equilateral triangle. So in this case, we've got 1-inch tall triangles. Okay. And so this is going to be good because this is going to be a similar measurement to what we do for the other steps. Okay. In this case, we're going to show you how to do it by skipping every other step. So instead of 1.155, we're going to go to 2.31. And so basically, we've got this here, and you can download this from our webpage. This is going to, for kind of weird increments like this, it's nice to have this stuff written out on a piece of paper or something, because it's pretty difficult to use your rulers on here to get these exact measurements. So you could make something like this yourself, of course, but we'll go into that later. So all we're going to do is loosen all these up. We're going to skip every other one. We're actually not going to need this. We're going to put this aside. And be as careful as you can getting these lined up. Holding them down while tightening. And if you run out of space here, obviously you can shift this over. Okay, and the same thing up here. Looks good. Okay, double checking those knobs. All right. Now, you always want to set your increments before you set your angle. You always want to set your increments when you're at 90 so that you can match these up very easily. Okay, so we're going to go to 60 degrees here. And carefully line that up. Okay, and now we don't have enough room over here, so we're going to line it up here. And first, we want to loosen this lock knob, quarter turn. Okay, and then get it close and put this up here. And a good tip is don't bump this up right away till you get it closer, because you could kind of bump this out of whack. Just get it very close, and then you're going to get more leverage if you hold your hand up higher. If you're going this way, you can push this way. If you're trying to move it from down here, you're going to struggle. But up here, you got a lot more leverage. And then just very gently get it close, bring it up. Here we go. and then just double check, make sure that didn't move process. And when you're tightening this back down, you want to hold it down tightly against this mat so that it doesn't try to move on you while you're tightening it. And if you're trying to be extra careful, you can double check to make sure it didn't move. Yeah. What we're going to be doing here is scoring at every 1.155 inches. So since we've got these set at double that increment, we're just going to draw one quick line here. And now we're ready. So for this, we're going to line it up right at the corner here to where we've got. See how I've got this extra mark here for this particular angle? So if you had specific angles that you were using frequently, you could make more sort of angled zero marks here. But this just tells you where the zero spot is. And you can also use that wheel to really make sure you got it right where you want it. Okay. And then once you've got it, so one good habit is to rotate this a little bit so that these are vertical and straight towards your body so that you're not leaning your tool. And we're just going to go ahead and score each of these lines. And that is also one of the advantages of the Versaguide. When you're cutting at angles, you can rotate the tool pretty easily, especially if you're working with smaller pieces of glass. That way you're kind of scoring straight towards yourself or straight away from yourself. Okay, so now instead of moving to the right to meet this mark, we're going to move towards the left so that we can make sure that we're getting this score here. So like I said, any one of these straight edges you can line up anywhere you want. So what I'm going to do is line up this second straight edge so that my cutting wheel is going straight over that where the mark meets the edge of the glass here. The very edge. Okay. Sure it's all bumped up against this edge here. And then we're just going to score that. Being careful not to lean. Okay. So now, as you can see, what we have now are diamonds of the exact size and shape that we want. So this is one of the ways to make these diamonds, but we're going to show you a second way in a little bit that's even easier than this method, and that is more versatile. So what we want to do now is go in the other way so we can make these into triangles. So we're going to do a little trick here so that we don't have to adjust this angle again the other way, since that's one of the most time-consuming parts. We're just going to flip this over. And now this is where we started. So this is because it's been flipped over. So this is what we want to line up with now, going in the other direction. So we're going to get right up here, go right over that corner. And you can kind of check these other spots and make sure that that where you're gonna score is going to be right at the edge of your previous score. If you can see the scores, it's flipped over, so if it wasn't transparent like this, you wouldn't be able to see these other scores. But as long as you line up to this corner carefully, then you should be good. So we're going to score this. And don't be afraid to really hold this down. These are not going to get bent. They'll spring right back into shape. So if you really need the stability, the best place to hold it is right there and just push down. Okay, so yeah, now we're going to do the same thing we did before by marking here, and we're going to move over. Okay. Okay, so now you can see, got all these little triangles. So I'm going to show you a trick to breaking these out. The fact that we scored on the back actually will make these easier to break out than they would have been if we scored them all on the same side. And I'll show you why here. So first of all, we're going to break these into strips. Okay. And then we're going to find, so that we can hold our hands in a natural position, we're going to find where the score is going this way on the top piece. So sometimes if you had it switch this way, oh, never mind, that's going to be the same. Okay. So first of all, we're just going to break that off, and we're just going to flip the piece of glass back and forth. And that way we don't have to keep moving our hands like this back and forth, right? My hands are shaking. Shaking hands today. One trick is obviously you want to shake it and get all the shards down at the bottom. That way you don't have all these little shards that are getting in your fingertips. Okay, so I'm going to also show you how to clean these mats. Our favorite way to clean all these little shards off of here is with one of these brushes. We get these from Harbor Freight. They're, I think, about $2.50 or so. They're very cheap. And we keep a lot of these around the studio. These work really great for brushing off these mats. So our bucket or a garbage can up here, or dustpan, and you're good to go. We're going to be cutting hexagons, okay? And so hexagons are actually going to be easier than cutting the triangles. So we've got this piece that's cut every 2 inches. So our hexagons are going to be 2 inches tall. And each side of the hexagon is going to be that 1.155 inches. We don't have to do any adjusting at all with this. All we're going to do is line it up, and we're going to score these blue marks here, starting from this corner. And so, again, just line it up, and you can turn this if you want, make it easier. And we're just going to, every other increment, which we've got these set to already. So now we are going to flip it as we did before. And this time, instead of going right from the corner, we're going to do that same offset again, where we start this increment away from the edge. Okay. And then we are going to, and then score on this backside here. Okay. I'll show you a little trick for breaking these out. You see you've got your hexagons here. And here is our, okay, so a little trick to breaking these out is, flip it and then break out here. So all you've got left is this little triangle. So then flip, break, break, flip, break, break, flip, break, break, flip. Okay. Okay. All right, and then we've got the 4 hexagons. So you would have had 8 total for that little strip. Okay, so now we're going to show you a different way to cut diamonds. So as you can see, these diamonds are kind of aligned diagonally. You cut these straight strips first. Now, if you just had one big piece of glass that you just want to cut all into diamonds, and you didn't want to do all this fancy math, or if you wanted to have a specific width of the triangle instead of a specific height, because you can see that this diamond here, you've got a 2-inch height and kind of a strange width, right? Well, what if you wanted a really specific width here? You could do this method as well for that, which means you'd be setting these at that width first. But also, the other cool thing about this method is you can get diamonds of whatever angle you want. So if you're trying to have very narrow diamonds or very wide diamonds or 45-degree diamonds or whatever degree you want, you can do that with this method. You don't have to figure out how tall each of these pieces, these strips here are. Okay, but we're going to create the exact kind of diamonds that we wanted here before, so we don't have to do any adjustments here. Again, we're just going to take this as it is at the 60 degrees and at this specific width, and we're going to just do the same thing that we've been doing. So we can go ahead and mark this first, so because we know we're going to need to do that. Now, if you were cutting diamonds twice this size, obviously you wouldn't need this mark, and you'd just be using this exact increment, and you just do a single instead of doing it twice. And then you basically have kind of what you've got going on here, except for a different orientation. Okay, so we're just going to do this again. Line it up at the corner. Okay, and we're going to scoot it backwards to this mark here. Okay, and we're going to flip and line up to this corner. Okay. Okay, and then we're going to move. We're going to make this mark here again. And we're going to move back. All right. Now we have our diamonds. So with these, the way to break them out is you break out all the strips from one side, right? And then you just flip them over, and all your scores are going to be on the other side. There we go. And we've got diamonds. One cool thing about the hexagons that I didn't mention is that you get a lot of little triangles as well when you're doing the hexagons. You got all these little triangles you can play with later too. So we just kind of went through an example of cutting smaller pieces out. So what we were working with was these strips here, which were 4 inches by 12 inches. Now, you could probably fit up to 10 inches or so when you're at this angle in here. So we could have cut in the same amount of time about over twice as many pieces there. You could also be working on a longer piece of glass and just kind of keep moving along it. Really, the most time-intensive thing is the adjustments. So what you want to do is plan ahead and figure out what you're going to do. Another thing is if you wanted to do several colors, let's say you wanted to do 4 different colors, you could just start doing the first step and do all the colors, all the strips that you need to do for the colors, all of these 90-degree scores, and then you could move on and do the angled scores on all of the colors. So that, again, you only need to do one adjustment to do that entire batch of many different colors of glass. Another thing that I wanted to mention is don't get confused by this 1.155. That's just a constant. So whatever height you want your triangle to be, and you're going to multiply that by 1.155. So let's say you wanted to do 2-inch tall triangles, then you'd multiply that by 2. If you wanted to do 1.5, you'd multiply it by 1.5. And so that's what we have here, is if you were to have 1.5-inch tall triangles or 3-inch tall diamonds and hexagons, right? In that case, your width would be 1.733. And so we've got all those marked here. And again, you can download this on the website and print it out. So what that means is you'd start out with 1.5 inches for these increments, right, for your 90-degree cuts. And then when you flip it horizontally, each of those things will be 1.5 inches tall. Now, if you're doing diamonds or hexagons, you're going to double that to 3 inches, right? Well, actually, with the diamonds, you don't need to make any cuts. So anyway, it's very versatile. You can do if you want to do some weird, crazy height of triangle or hexagon or whatever, you just multiply whatever that is by 1.155 to get your spacing for these diagonals. And what you want to remember is that everything is doubled for hexagons, and on this, and on this second part after the flip, you don't line it up right to this corner, you line it up to that, whatever that side length is, away. Okay, that's the end of the tutorial.